Just a note that this podcast may touch on difficult themes and include some challenging conversations, so please take care when listening. This is The Widow Diaries, a podcast that holds space for the often unspoken stories of grief, love and life after loss as a young widow. I'm Caroline Winter, and like so many, I've been on this journey. So come with me each episode and hear from others who've also walked the winding path of widowhood in their own way. The Widow Diaries, for First Light Widowed support, where no story is the same and every story matters. Fear is a funny thing after loss. It can keep you safe, but it can also keep you stuck. After my husband Richard died, the idea of loving again felt both comforting and terrifying at the same time. Comforting because I knew how beautiful love could be. Terrifying because I also knew how much it could hurt. So for a long time I wondered if there was even space in my heart for another love, or whether loving someone new would somehow mean leaving Richard behind. What I've learned, and maybe you have too, is that love doesn't replace love. It expands. Today, Richard sits side by side in my heart with my now husband, Drew. Conquering that fear and opening yourself to love again is a thread that runs deeply through the story of Dr. Kim Morgan-Short. Kim is a military doctor, she's a mother of 5, and a woman who has faced loss more than once, yet still believes in the possibility of love. She even went on a TV show in search of it. Her journey is one of courage, resilience, and stepping forward even when fear is sitting right beside you. Kim, it's lovely to talk to you. Welcome to the Widow Diaries.
Thank you very much, Carol.
Let's start at the beginning. It's always a good place to start. You have deep roots in the military through your family, through your husbands and yourself, and I'm keen to know how life in the military shaped who you are today.
I think pretty much from a very young stage in my life, I had always wanted to join the military, and I was considering going through university. I'm a doctor and doing medical school and also being in the University Air Squadron at the time. Medicine was a very hard degree, and there was lots of partying and lots of other social aspects to it. And I never actually got around to joining the University Air Squadron. And I then ended up quite young with a baby, a little bit by accident. I know that's laughable when you're a doctor, but he did come along much earlier in my career than I was planning. And my husband, Shorty, was an F-111 pilot. And at the time, they're much better at it now, but at the time it was very unlikely when two people were serving together to potentially get co-location postings. So we had this very big discussion about the whole thing and decided that the only real way to manage this was me joining the reserve, and he obviously was full-time, and that I would ultimately work wherever I could, which mostly ended up being as a civilian on the military bases and putting on my uniform whenever I could in a reserve capacity. And that way we got to, live in the same location, in the same house. And in those days, I must be honest, his career took precedence, which wouldn't be the same in this day and age, but it worked out for us.
So you do have those deep roots. We're going to hear more about that as we go along. Now, you mentioned Shorty, your first husband, and you met him and through that shared military life. What was he like, and what did you love most about him?
He was just an honestly larger-than-life character. He was very tall, and everyone thought his name was Shorty as a nickname because he was so tall. And I took great pains to explain that I was married to an Air Force pilot that didn't really have a nickname. It was our last name, Short. And I was thinking even Goose would be better, Maverick, Goose, anything. But everyone else had a nickname, but he was just Shorty. But because everyone thought it was a nickname, I didn't even know what his real name was for some time after we started dating. And his real name was Anthony, and his mother and family always called him Anthony. but I never called him anything but Shorty.
If we go back to that stage in your life, you were building a life together and raising young children. What did family life look like for you back then, I guess intertwined with the military?
We certainly had a very busy life, and as a military fast jet pilot, particularly the F-111, they did a lot of night flying. So I was working during the day, had the kids, and he was often gone till very late at night. And then they were gone. The Air Force did things slightly differently than the Army, so they would be gone 2 or 3 weeks, back home for 4 weeks, gone for 2 weeks, back home for a couple of weeks, gone for 6 weeks, back home for a week, that type of thing. And it was really not very predictable. We didn't know what was going to happen. It was very difficult to plan for parties, holidays, anything. So I just had to keep the home fires burning. I had to keep, ferrying the children around. When he was home, he was a football coach for my son. He was a great father, always swimming in the pool, playing with the kids. But he was a little bit like Father Christmas. He'd come home laden with presents, and I was the Wicked Witch of the West because someone had to be the disciplinarian, someone had to maintain order, someone had to run the show all by herself, and that was me.
Wow. That sort of responsibility when you are holding it all together, and you had 3 children together. I mean, that's quite a lift, isn't it, when your partner is away so much?
I think it's sort of an age-old military spouse's lifestyle, which is, if you can't manage it on your own, you won't survive it. And so, in a very peculiar way, I think the military trained me to be a very good widow, and I was totally competent in managing everything by myself. Uh, you know, the situation didn't change after he died. In actual fact, I got myself a nanny, and in a weird way, my life suddenly became easier. Obviously, not because of the grief, but because of the everyday help. But it definitely was hard work from day dot. But we also lived all over the world. We moved around. We sort of used to think that we had more friends than we could cope with, because we thought we were a golden couple anyway. The doctor at the military base and the pilot and the 3 shiny little kids, and we thought we had a charmed life.
You have already alluded to the fact that you were widowed and you lost Shorty. Can you take us back to 1999? What happened, and what do you remember about those early days of grief?
I think all military wives, particularly pilots' wives, would never dream of not answering the phone or not answering a knock on the door. And I'd actually been away and out on the Air Force Base for a week doing what's known as a ground combat course, where you literally were in fatigues and crawling around the bush for a week, filthy and dirty and covered in camouflage paint. My husband was away, and my mother and father had to mind the children, or agreed to mind the children for me. I came home, and I had been home less than 5 minutes. I've got the kids, I've just put them in front of the TV and thought, oh my gosh, I've got to have a shower, when a young nurse from 3 doors down ran up and said, my mum's having a heart attack, help me, help me.
Oh, gosh.
And I just looked at her and thought, have you called the ambulance? She goes, no. And I've got 2 little kids. One was 3, one was 5. I left the 9-year-old sitting watching TV. I grabbed the 3 and 5-year-old because I couldn't leave them. I'm covered in war paint. I'm covered in filth. We raced down. Sure enough, the lady down the road was having a heart attack. I called the ambulance, waited there, and, they did their thing. And I trudged back home 3 doors up with my girls. And I was so fatigued and so shattered, I just said to my son, who was 9, mind your sisters, I'm going to go and have a shower. So I was washing all the grime off, looking in the shower, and it sort of was covered with this camouflage paint. I came out and fed the kids, put the kids to bed. Over the next couple of days, there was my son's football game, And then on the night that it happened, my husband had rung to find out how, in those days, you really only got phone calls. He'd only sent the first email to me a couple of nights before. I didn't even know how to email in those days. And on the night it happened, he rang quickly before he walked out to the jet saying, how did the boys' rugby game go? Because he was the coach. And one of our friends, one of the F111 Navigator friends, had stepped up to coach. And I told him how the game went. And he said, I don't have much time and I've got screaming children at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm running around going, we can't talk for long. And he said, I love you. I'm stepping out to the jet. Apparently he had time to send an email, which of course I didn't see because I didn't check those things. And later that night, at 3 in the morning, I get a knock on the door. And probably the only thing that saved me from believing that this was the bad knock was the fact that I thought it was the lady down the road, the daughter. I thought it was going to be her again knocking on the door, and a little bit of me was throwing back the covers of my bed going, goodness gracious, honestly. And as I came to the front door and turned the light on and there was frosted glass on the front door, I could see two blue men with sort of blue shapes, and that's just something that makes your heart sink. And I didn't want to open the door. And when I opened the door, there's the officer commanding there and the chaplain in full uniform and hats, which is, the appropriate way to, and respectful way, I think, to notify you. But I knew as soon as I saw them. And I'm in this sort of incongruous position of being in shiny pink silk pyjamas. I look back now and think, all I could think about was I'm standing there in pink silk pyjamas. And so that was a shock. And they're saying to me, do you want us to ring anyone? And I'm thinking, you've got to ring Shorty. And that's my first thought was, he's my rock.
Yeah.
He'll know what to do. And that was the thing where the chaplain just said to me, Kim, who can we ring? And luckily they rang my parents, and my parents were not too far away. And Dad was fully dressed because my dad was very organised in those days. My mum also turned up in her pyjamas. So the two of us are in our pyjamas, my dad's fully dressed, and so it began.
Did you ever think that something like this could have happened, considering Shorty's job and the world in which you inhabited?
I think the world in which we inhabited was, set by death and destruction, and certainly we'd lost friends over time, and quite a few different friends over different eras. And but the boys always had this, it'll never happen to me. In fact, just before Christmas, a couple of months before he died, I only found out that there was an F111 memorial in Clovis, New Mexico, and on it were 113 names. I had no idea that 113 people had been killed on a single aircraft type, the F111, which was only in use between USA and Australia. And Shorty and Nige, his navigator, are now 114 and 115 on that memorial. And when I spoke to Shorty about it, I was actually really kind of upset. And this came because this newfangled thing, this internet, someone had put up a picture of it on the internet. And that was something that I saw. And Shorty looked me directly in the eye and he said to me, don't worry about me, baby. I'll be pink mist if it happens. And that was the arrogance that they all had. And what he meant was I'll be vaporised. I won't, I won't know anything about it. And all I could think about after I got the news was this horrific comment that he'd made several months before about pink mist. And it was extremely distressing. But, you get lulled into this false sense of security when you're young and you're in love and you're happy and your life's perfect. You just don't think it'll ever happen to you. And you sort of felt immune from it, even though we had lost friends. And when it then happens to you, people can't believe it either. But I know from, our world, there's a great relief. I know because I felt it the same when we lost other friends. Thank God it wasn't us.
Yeah, yeah. Kim, at the time you were 34, is that right?
Yes.
And you had 3 children under 10. How did you find the strength to keep going amid such shock, such responsibility, and at such a young age?
My dad is my hero, and my dad definitely is somebody who's taught me how to be resilient. And right from a young age, Dad was that sort of person who, if I fell off my horse, he literally made me get back up again, and said, it's not hurting, make it hurt him more, And you also have 3 little kids, and they got up in the morning and they wanted to do their things. I actually remember that the crash happened on a Sunday night. Obviously, I got notified at 3 in the morning on a Monday morning. But my daughter Abby, who was 3, wanted to go to ballet on the Tuesday. And ballet was her favourite thing. And she was hysterical at the idea that we weren't going to ballet. So in this weird moment, I've taken her to ballet, and the other ballet mums are sitting with me in this coffee shop looking at me. And I'm going, don't say anything.
How
Don't
surreal.
say anything. Because I'll fall apart.
Yeah, of course. Of course. So you had your family, you've spoken about your dad, and your mum obviously was there on the night that you got this awful news. What about the military family that you had? It's a very tight community, very strong community. What kind of role did they play in helping you navigate this new situation?
Look, that remains a very painful issue, actually. At the time, there were a lot of investigations going on, and to be honest, this is a whole bunch of, in those days, mostly men, and they all don't believe it's ever going to happen to them, but they also don't want to think about it. So there was a lot of don't talk to Kim, don't talk about it being the crash, and also not to the other widow, because there were 2 of us. The navigator's widow had a 1-year-old at the time, not even 11-month-old. And there was a degree of an expectation from me that people would step up. And believe me, some individual people stepped up for sure. But as a group, the Air Force did not step up, and in fact almost washed their hands of me. And that was a very painful experience. In the past, they didn't, and this was a long time ago, they didn't let the widows attend the Board of Investigation. I demanded, along with the other widow, that we got to observe the board and actually be present with lawyers at the Board of Inquiry. We were deliberately kept out of the accident investigation process, which was pretty traumatic. Because of this ridiculous pink mist comment, my father said to me, because of course I was still serving and so was the other widow, but because I was serving, my father said to me, make them take you to the island, because the island was a remote island in the South China Sea off the east coast of Malaysia in the middle of nowhere. I would never get there, so I thought. And Dad said, make them take you, darling, because you're not going to bring him home. And so I made the Air Force take me.
Yeah.
I made the Air Force fly me over the crash site in a helicopter. So I ended up with one of my Air Force Reserve comrades. He accompanied me. We flew to Singapore. We ended up out in Malaysia. We got picked up by a helicopter from an island called Pulau Tioman, which we had to land on in a tiny aircraft, which was terrifying. Got picked up by a helicopter off HMAS Tobruk, which was a ship at the time. I was flown over the crash site. I lowered some flowers down, which incidentally were given to me by some Malaysian ladies on the island, who made up a wreath for me to take in the helicopter, which was just a beautiful, beautiful moment. And then I went and landed on the ship. And as we landed, the ship was rolling, and I actually, in all my military career, didn't really realise how hard they have to land a helicopter on board a rolling ship. And they slammed this helicopter down on board the ship, and by the time I'd kind of recovered, because for a moment there I thought we'd crashed, and I thought, oh my God, my kids are going to be orphans. By the time I recovered my composure, because I'd been sitting near an open door, I nearly, I thought we were going to go over the other side of the ship. And when I ducked my head under the rotor wash, and you duck your head as you're coming away from a helicopter, as I stood up, every single sailor on board the HMAS Tobruk was standing to attention and saluting me. It was one of the most incredible and sad moments of my life. The respect they showed me was phenomenal, and I didn't expect it because I wasn't looking. I didn't see them all there. It's as I was sort of recovering from what I thought was this near helicopter crash onto the deck, and I saw them, and it was everything I could do to stop weeping, as the captain of the ship met me and took me down to his wardroom to have a drink. And that was a very special moment, something that made me feel like, yes, all these men and women that serve do care. They do care about what's happening, and I'm really, really grateful for how they behaved. A very special moment. And then came all the inquiries and boards of inquiries and things where there was a great deal of contention in it, a great deal of what I believed was whitewashing, a great deal of problems with releasing things to the press, and the press either deliberately misunderstanding what things meant, and it created an enormous amount of distress. So I took a job in Ireland, a locum doctor job in rural Ireland. I packed up the children on the sort of second Christmas after I didn't want to be there for another Christmas alone, flew out on Christmas Day and arrived in Ireland, and I just said, I'm quitting Australia. I'm gone. And I did.
How helpful, therapeutic, all of those sorts of words was that move for you and for your children?
I think everyone thought I'd gone mad. I think, my mum and my mother-in-law certainly did. My dad didn't, because he knew what I was doing. And I just took this job sight unseen. I'm currently writing a book about it, actually. Because
interesting.
I turned up in Ireland with 3 children for a job, and they promised me that the doctor has accommodation. And when I get there, they're going, the doctor's house, it's not built yet. So I'm in a little town called Carlow, in a place I'd never even heard of, with no accommodation, 3 children, and snowing between Christmas and New Year in the year 2000. And so it started. But I'll be honest, the Irish do death very well. They're much more comfortable with it, or certainly were at the time. And once they'd established I was a widow, not a single mother, people just came out of the woodwork to help me.
Wow.
And I guess because there was no threat to them, there was no nobody was at fault, nobody was to blame, nobody had trouble facing the music. I just got these wonderful, warm Irish hands everywhere holding me up, and I think it was very therapeutic. It was probably the only thing that kept me going, to be honest.
That's remarkable. And so how long did you remain in Ireland, and what brought you back to Australia?
I was there nearly a year, and what brought me back to Australia was my mother saying my son would have been due to start grade 8, which was the first year of high school back then, and Mum was saying you don't want him to miss out on starting high school with his peer group. So I came back so my son could start with his peer group at high school.
Did you feel stronger when you returned?
No, I actually fell in a heap when I returned. I was actually, feeling like time had passed for me, and I thought that everybody would have got over it in a weird way, because I'm thinking it's not their problem, it's my problem. And I think the people that crossed to the other side of the street, and the people who would look down and not talk to me, and the people who didn't visit when they should have, all of those things, I thought it would be over by then. And it really wasn't. And I felt like I'd lost my tribe when I got back. I really did feel like I'd lost my reason for being, my military connections. I felt like I was a stranger in what used to be the most familiar environment. And yeah, I fell to bits and actually ended up having to see someone.
Oh, Kim. And so what was it that helped you rebuild and find yourself again?
Well, one, my psychiatrist, who I was referred through a doctor's health service, and I said, I'm just struggling. And I guess I probably should have put my hand up a long time before, but I just thought I could fix it myself. And I think I've realised over time that you need some professional help in these areas, because you can't fix it yourself. It's too traumatic, and you need someone to be a bit objective when you're totally in a world of subjective hurt. And she was instrumental in almost slapping me around and saying, life isn't meant to be fair. You can't keep saying this isn't fair, because she said, who would it be fair to? And she was quite firm about a lot of things like that. And the fact that, even when you feel that you've got no reason to go on, that you really do. You've got 3 children and a whole lot of other things. And then I met my second husband accidentally, and he had been posted into my late husband's squadron as the British exchange officer. So he ultimately was the one who saved me.
Wow. Let's talk about Stewart. So what was it like for you opening your heart to someone new after, such profound loss?
When I basically met him, he had been in my husband's squadron for quite a few months, in fact, nearly a year while I was over in Ireland. So we hadn't met, and he was very well aware of the loss. In fact, the navigator who died was Shorty, had been on exchange in the UK and been his navigator. So when Shorty and his navigator were killed, Stewart was in Kuwait, maintaining the no-fly zone. He was in a bunker in Kuwait, and he came out of that bunker, got a text message on his phone, and said, oh my God, his friend, the navigator, was dead. He said, I wondered who the pilot was. I wondered if I knew him, and I wondered if he was married. And he said he never imagined that he would actually end up marrying the widow and raising that pilot's 3 children.
Wow.
But this is the interconnectedness of the military.
I'm speechless. It's, there are so many serendipitous moments there.
It literally is so, we were so interconnected, but we ourselves had never met.
Did that somehow help you form that relationship and feel comfortable in the early days?
I think he completely understood. He understood because he had actually lost, over the years, I think he lost 20 friends. He was in the British forces and
Good grief.
they killed a lot more people over the years. In fact, I think one of his best friends crashed at the Farnborough Air Show and he watched it at one point. So he was
Gee.
not a stranger to military friends dying. So he stepped in and took up the mantle. He was sort of in the midst, because I was actually in the middle of a lawsuit at this stage. I decided to force a coronial inquest, and then I decided to sue the Air Force, and he was absolutely not part of it. He was told not to talk to me about it, which is hilarious because we were living together. And he was there at a time when many discrepancies were being discussed at the squadron level, when he knew very well what my contentious issues with it were, and he knew what the truth was, and he was a bit of a piggy in the middle at the time. And of course, I don't really understand why it was a surprise that we got together, that people were surprised by it, because these Air Force pilots were pretty much a breed that I knew. I knew so much about him without even having met him. I knew what his personality was. He was a completely different human being to Shorty, but his basic qualities were very similar. And that's why I found it kind of pretty easy, and the lifestyle I knew.
Having lost a husband and someone that you love deeply, did you have any fears around that, getting into this new relationship and this new love with Stewart?
Oh, absolutely. And given, that Shorty had died in a crash and Stewart was flying the exact same aircraft that he flew, it caused me all sorts of problems and all sorts of worries. And I did have to speak to my psychiatrist about it. And till Stewart sat me down one day and he said, "This is what I do. This is who I am. This is everything that I want in my life." And he said, "At some point, you're going to have to learn to live with it, or we're going to have to let this go." And he said, "I'll do everything I can to reassure you." And by then, sort of text messaging was more common, and he would do things like, when he landed, say at 1 a.m, he would text me or sometimes call me and say, "Landed, going to brief." That's all he'd say. And then I knew he'd landed, and that his late home would be just because they were in debriefing.
Yeah.
And so he even did that when we ended up moving back to the UK, because his exchange posting was up. He'd asked me to go with him and to move back to the UK with him. And I remember we actually even broke up for a period of time, because I said, "Are you kidding? I don't want to pack my life up again and move to the UK. I've just got resettled in Australia." And then another friend, another military pilot, died, not of a crash, but of a medical issue. And his widow was a good friend of mine. He was a good friend of mine. And there I was at the funeral several years after Shorty's funeral, and I'm looking at her, and she's got these 2 little kids, and she's in the fugue state that we all are, just not knowing whether she's Arthur or Martha. And I'm at the wake, and all these people were drunk, and then they started talking to me and asking how I am. And I'm thinking, why are you asking me now? It's years later. You haven't spoken to me for years. Why does it take you being drunk at a wake to ask how I am? So I picked up the phone and I rang Stewart and I said, "Come and pick me up from the wake." And he came and picked me up. He goes, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I'm going with you." And he goes, "What?" I said, "I'm coming with you to England." He says, "Oh my God." He said, "We better get married then." And I said, "You better get asking then." He got down on one knee in my bedroom, asked me to marry him. And a couple of weeks later, myself and the 3 kids were jetting off to another country yet again.
Oh my goodness, that's a whirlwind and a half.
It was.
Goodness me. And so How long were you then in England? Obviously different to Ireland, but away this second time and when things took a turn?
So we were in the UK nearly 5 years, and then I had sort of extracted the promise from him that if I didn't want to be in England forever, when he got to his 20-year point, which was his pension point with the British forces, that we would get out and come back to Australia. So at the time, he was coming back to Australia ostensibly to fly the F-111, which was still in service then, and we were going to move back to Australia. When the global financial crisis hit in 2008, and they withdrew the offer for him to join the Australian Air Force, but he'd already resigned from the British forces, and we'd already signed a contract on building a house in Australia. And all of a sudden, we've got nowhere to go. I had to go back to work full time, and he had to go to Saudi Arabia and took a job with British Aerospace flying Tornadoes in Saudi Arabia. So we commuted for 3 years, me back in Australia, my son staying in the UK for university. I brought the girls back to Australia to school. Stewart was in Saudi Arabia, and we commuted from Brisbane to Saudi Arabia for 3 years, which was torture. And then I decided to go out to Saudi Arabia, and I worked as a doctor on the compound for British Aerospace Systems, and Stewart was training the Royal Saudi Air Force pilots on Tornadoes, which actually worried me more than anything because of the risks involved with that. So we lived that life for 2 years, and I did a lot of commuting, trying to see the children. We flew the children, by that stage young adults, out to Saudi. And then finally, Stewart got an offer to join the Australian Air Force. By then, the F-111s were long retired, but he was a fighter combat instructor, and they had invited him to come back as an instructor for the Super Hornet. Finally, he came back, but they wanted him to do some refresher courses on different sorts of aircraft, a Hawk. So he was away for 18 months
Oh my gosh.
in Perth and then Newcastle. And I commuted. We both commuted because I stayed in Brisbane with this house we'd built. And then he came back to Brisbane, and later that year, which was 2014, he had cancer and developed cancer, which we finally were living in the same house. We'd just become empty nesters, and he got diagnosed with cancer.
You both must have felt so robbed, aside from anything else, but just, finally making it where it was just the two of you in the same spot.
It was absolutely devastating because I'm a doctor. The sort of cancer he had was something that I knew he would have almost no chance of defeating. Of course, he didn't know that, and he went with the sort of gusto that only a man like him, an absolutely rock solid, tough, man. He went into the treatment protocols and the masses of surgery and hideously disfiguring surgery, and he went into it thinking he was going to beat it. He ultimately told me, because I had just been about to deploy in uniform to the Middle East for 7 months, just as he was diagnosed in 2014. I had to pull out at the last minute. In 2016, they wanted me to deploy again for 7 months. He said to me, if you don't go, it means you think I'm not going to make it. So off I went to the Middle East for 7 months as the senior medical officer on our biggest base in the Middle East. And I was away for 7 months, had a career rewarding time. It was a very intense time. It was, hard work, but rewarding. I was home in October of 2016 for 5 days after being away for 7 months. And we were called into the office by his oncologist, and we were literally told, you are now terminal, you've got 12 months to live if you're lucky. And the exact words, go home and get your affairs in order.
Kim, gosh. So did you just spend as much time as you could together at the moment?
Well, he became rapidly very sick to the point where we didn't think he'd last 6 weeks. So we flew by, all the children, his 2 children from previous marriage out, and his family. We had a big powwow about what was going to happen. Then we managed to get our hands on a miracle drug from America, which at the time was one of the immune therapy drugs, which was meant to be the new treatment protocol. He was started on that drug and it melted all of the cancer right through his whole body away.
Whoa.
And he kept working and I kept working. We're both going out to the Air Force Base together. We're still working at Amberley. And he said, I want to keep working. I want to be normal. And obviously not flying at the time, but having the treatment and going out and working with the squadron. And I'm working at the medical centre on base. And for a whole year, it melted this cancer away. And just for a second, I thought, maybe, God wouldn't do this to me twice. Maybe this is going to work. And at the end of 2017, it all came back again with a vengeance. And one of my colleagues, and I'll be forever grateful, said to me, what are you doing at work, Kim? What are you doing? And I said, he wants to work. He said, don't be an idiot. You don't know how long this is going to be, but I guess it's not going to be long. Go and do stuff. So I convinced him to let's start going and doing stuff. And he survived 2 more years. And he wouldn't have survived 2 more years if I wasn't a doctor, because he had septicemia in the Margaret River, which required a whole lot of drama from me. He had radiation infections and wounds. He had bilateral pulmonary emboli and death on the golf course in New Zealand and resuscitation by me. He had a stroke on Hamilton Island and had to be resuscitated by me. It just went on and on and on for 2 years of absolute hell. But we did it together. We did everything we could do. We travelled, we held hands, we looked at sunsets, we lived a life. And he eventually died in October 2019 after one hell of a battle. And with all of the children, the 5 kids, my 3 that he'd raised, and his own 2, and his sisters and me around him. And it was cruel and hideous. It was the worst death I've ever seen in my entire career, let alone my own husband. And he kept fighting because he was only 49 years old. And I took a breath after he died at the end of 2019. COVID happened, and all of a sudden, no one did anything. No one invited you anywhere. Everyone stayed in their own houses. The support was difficult. And I didn't want to go back to work at Amberley, so I took a job with Defence Force recruiting, which was considered an essential service. So I'd sit on the bus with my mask on and go to work and gown up and glove up and not see anybody or not touch anybody. And then during that 2 years of COVID, my dogs died one after the other, and I think my reason for living went too.
Kim, that is more than any one person should ever have to handle all at once. Your story is remarkable, but you are remarkable. Many of us can't imagine being widowed once, let alone twice. And that second loss of Stewart was very different to the first with Shorty, obviously. How did you manage going through this a second time? And I guess what What has that taught you? What has the grief taught you about, well, resilience, your identity, and just your human capacity to endure?
I think I get to be one of the very few people in the world who knows is dying fast better or slow better.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, slow is worse. I mean, I think the sudden death was really traumatic for me. Obviously, hopefully, for Shorty, not very traumatic, I hope. For Stewart, the 5 years of hell and the last 3 years of absolute disastrous hell was hell for both of us. And yes, people say you've got time to say goodbye and people say you've got time to do things, but we already really loved each other. I think in the nearly 20 years we were together, we never fought because I'd already lost Shorty and I was determined I was never going to have a fight in case he died.
Yeah.
I was never going to get angry in case he died. I was never going to go to sleep, on a problem in case he died. So I think we had a better than average marriage. I truly do. I think we had I know that sounds really arrogant, but I think we had a perfect marriage. And it was so hard to deal with this idea that he was just washing down the stream and I couldn't grab him. It was every nightmare you ever have, forever and ever, is someone you love washing away and you can't grab hold of them. And he wrote me a letter that was left in my safe to open only after he died. And that was so thoughtful and so helpful. And in it, he told me how much he loved me, how perfect he thought our life was, how happy our marriage had been, how everything that I was and we were together made him happy. He left me a little bit of a list of things in such a military pilot way. He had bullet points of what he wanted to do. And at the end, he said, I want you to find someone else. I want you to be happy. I know you're not going to be happy when you read this. He said, but you are perfect to me, just like in Love Actually. And he said, you deserve to find someone else to love you, and I want you to.
Kim, what an absolute gift.
That has been a gift. It has been a gift, and I have opened my heart since, and I've had it absolutely stonking on. It beggars belief that somebody could know what I've been through and dangle a third love in front of me and then treat me with disrespect. And I think I've been a bit naive because I have had two wonderful, really big, tall, fabulous alpha males who are also family men, faithful, adoring, who worshipped me. I was so lucky.
You are extremely lucky, as they were, to have you. I am curious, though. You are remarkable in the fact that you have opened yourself to love and to dating again. And that to me just says how much love you have inside you, to give and to receive. But I do want to touch on the fact that you have done that not just privately but on national TV. I didn't know how else to phrase it. For anyone who watched The Golden Bachelor, they would recognise you. What made you say yes to that opportunity?
Well, it was actually just before my 60th birthday, and I don't know why the application form didn't come through to me because I would have thought I was the right age group, but it came through to one of my F111 wife friends, and she forwarded it through to me. She's happily married, and said, I think you'd be great on this, Kim. And I looked at the application form and thought, why not? I was literally just about to turn 60. The problem being is that you had to do a video for this application form, and I've already told you earlier before I'm not too good with the IT, and I couldn't upload this video. It was in the wrong format or it was too big or something. I didn't know how to cut it down. I've got absolutely no skills in this. So I just got frustrated. I sent the application form off, and on my 60th birthday, I was looking at a house to buy or unit to buy, and the real estate agent had just got engaged and she'd gone to a dating agency, which is a paid proposition. And she goes, "Oh, Kim, I can get you this agency." Next thing you know, I've paid $5,000 because I thought any gentleman who's been paid $5,000 themselves would be keen to have a relationship, not just treat them. So I got set up on a date with someone, and then out of the blue I get a phone call from the producers or the casting people, and they said, "We'd like to audition you for Golden Bachelor." I said, "No, no, no. I've just paid $5,000. I've just been introduced to someone. No, that's not for me. Thank you." And they kept ringing me, and I finally said, "You're going to put a kiss of death on this." It wasn't even a relationship. I literally been on a few dates with somebody, and that somebody turned out not to be worth $5,000, not worth $5. And in a fit of pique, I rang the producers back and said, "Is it too late for me to come on?" And the reason that I ended up appearing late and I was the intruder was because I was too late. But because I took up racing Porsches, I decided when I had broken up with someone I'd had a relationship with who hadn't treated me well, I didn't know what to do with my life in 2024. So I thought I would join the Porsche Club to go on social drives and have a social life. And within a few months of joining the Porsche Club, I've got talked into racing. And I'm going, "Do you know how old I am?" And I just have my shopping car, you know. Next thing you know, I'm racing Porsches. Next thing you know, I'm winning races.
Oh my gosh.
And so next thing you know, the producers on The Golden Bachelor have me arriving on the red carpet racing a Porsche down the driveway.
Of course they do.
And I missed the red carpet because I was going way too fast, and I slid it in sideways and sprayed gravel all over the production crew and the film crew. And so when I did that, and I got introduced to the Golden Bachelor, and he was a widower, I actually, and bizarrely, he looked a lot like my late husband Stewart from a distance, tall and grey. I had a moment going, "This is it. I've done the right thing. This was meant to be." And it turned out that was not the case.
No. Should we leave people to go back and watch to find out what happens? What I am
Yes.
curious about, Kim, is what it was like for you putting yourself out there in such a public way, especially after everything that you've been through. I mean, that's beyond vulnerable, isn't it?
I talked a lot with my children and my stepchildren as well about how they would feel about it, because I said, inevitably, they're picking me because I have an interesting, I guess, backstory. And I said, without a doubt, it's going to be in the public eye. And if you kids don't think you could handle it, or you don't think I'm going to handle it, I need you to let me know, and I won't do it. And initially they were all kind of, "Oh my God, what are you thinking?" And then as things went on, they were kind of like, "Mum, even if he's not the one, maybe someone out there is going to see you on TV and they're going to be perfect for you, and you wouldn't have met them otherwise. And
Aw.
maybe our dads up in heaven are going to work something out for you." And so the kids were very much on board by the end, and their support was everything. But, you know, one of my daughters said, "Be yourself, Mum, but don't be yourself."
As only a daughter could say, very
which
honestly.
meant don't be your usual loud, blustery self. And then my best friend, who's a paediatrician, she said, and she was on the show as my friend on the show, and she said, "Don't you swear, Kim, because I'm kind of known have a bit of a potty mouth at times, and she said, "I will never speak to you again if you swear on national TV." So the entire time I'm on the show, I was watching everything I said. So I wasn't quite myself. And then the other thing is that I don't drink alcohol. And so I don't get lippy. So no matter how much they tried to get me to say things that were unkind, I don't drink, so I didn't.
Smart lady, very smart lady. Kim, did that whole experience change at all the way you see yourself? And I mean as a woman, as a widow, and as someone still open to love?
I think what in the end I made some very, very, very good friends on the show. The vast majority of the women on the show I absolutely have so much time for. They're fantastic. They've had different experiences. They've had a lot of hurt in their love lives. There was one other widow, Shamsi, who was beautiful, and we're just best of friends now. A lot of the other women had relationship trauma and traumatic divorces and things. And a lot of the late night talking, because we weren't allowed to have phones, internet, TV, anything. We were locked up in a house for 6 weeks together with nothing. And that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. We talked and we talked and we talked and we talked. And I came to realise that my experience was actually a privilege. I had 2 beautiful marriages. I had 2 beautiful husbands. I didn't get divorced. They didn't stop loving me. They just died. And the other women on the show had really traumatic, self-esteem destroying, traumatic journeys from love that went bad. And the more I talked with them and the more I sat and listened to their very, very sad and traumatic experiences, I felt disconnected to them in some ways because mine was all about love. And I actually feel grateful now. And that show helped me feel grateful that I didn't have to go through what they went through. And I actually felt in a way, and not in a bad way, but I felt that they were a little envious of me because I was so happy in my relationships. And that also made me feel, in a weird way, like a weight had come off my shoulders as well. And I feel like we're all still friends. We all catch up all the time. We've created something that I don't think a lot of older women ever get to do, is to make really good, close, new friends. And we've made a whole bunch of new friends, and I would honestly say that the show gave me so many more positives than negatives. In saying that, there's been a repercussion on my potential love life since, and a man that I was particularly fond of just couldn't cope with the idea that I was on TV and unburdening my soul on TV. And that was difficult. It was difficult because it wasn't his place to tell me whether I should or shouldn't, but he chose that to be something he couldn't deal with. And since then, I'm still single because I haven't found anybody who wants to step up to that plate. And in some ways, they feel I'm judging them, but I actually am not. I feel like the proof is in the pudding. I fell madly in love with my husband, Stewart, after Shorty. I never compared him. In fact, he got a better ride than Shorty did. He got more love because I was so aware of it. And I feel like, the third special person in my life is going to just get everything. He's going to get the worship, and I'm just waiting for that.
I absolutely love that you've come out of this whole experience with an even greater love for love. You obviously would love to repartner again.
Yes.
What does companionship look like to you now at this stage of life after everything you've experienced?
Well, I'm loath to say it because of the people that I have dated. The thing they're running fast away from is marriage, because they've all had terrible broken marriages.
Mm.
They're all, they're all scarred in a different way. So, I daren't say it, but I would love to get married again. And if I say it, it's going to sort of regale me to the trash heap of love, because I'm never going to, people are frightened of it. I'm not frightened of it. It was nothing but positive for me. In that saying, I do think when you're over 60, people have their own houses, or I certainly do. It's hard to mix finances and things like that. And I race cars. I spend a lot of time doing that. I love it. I work still. I'm on a board. I very busy on lots of committees. I spent a lot of time, 30 plus years as a military spouse, not ever being 24/7. I don't think that's what it looks like to me. But what I want to have is that person I know who's got my back, and by God, I'll have theirs. And I want to do fun stuff with someone. I want someone to wake me up in the morning and say, "Morning, beautiful, I'm thinking about you." I want someone, to ring me up at night and say, "Hey, how was your day?" They're the things that I miss, really miss. I mean, I've been on my own now 6 years, but I don't think I want that forever. And I remain optimistic, because that's my nature, and I think I am resilient. I thank my parents for my fabulous childhood. I thank my friends for all their support. I thank my upbringing for the lucky country and the fact that I've had such an amazing life. And I thank my children especially for giving me a reason to go on, and my grandchild, my grandson, who is absolutely my favourite human being at the moment. And I want to share all of this love that's just busting to come out of me with somebody. And I'll wait.
Well, whoever that person ends up being is going to be one lucky bugger. That I can definitely say. Kim, before we wrap, I ask 3 questions of every guest. I'm going to ask them of you. I'd like to know what you do, what you like to do to remember Shorty and Stewart.
Well, I think when the kids were very little, there was all sorts of discussion about whether we should scatter Shorty's ashes from the bomb bay of an F-111, or whether we should throw them out to sea. And the Catholic chaplain, because Shorty was Catholic, said to me, "Kim, in my experience," and this is one of the few things that I well agreed with him on, he said, "little children don't understand that concept, and they feel like they should have somewhere to go." So I did inter Shorty's ashes out at the Air Force Base. And when the children were young, we used to go outside, and they used to call this star up in heaven Daddy Star. And every night we would go and talk to Daddy Star. For years and years, we'd talk to Daddy Star at night. And then we'd go out on special occasions out to the grave. Now, Stewart told me in his little note that he left for me that he wanted to stay with me. So his ashes are with me. And I ended up putting a plaque above Shorty's out at the Air Force Base. And I go out there when I need some time just to think about them. Shorty's ashes are interred there, Stu's aren't. But my intention will be that when I die, that my ashes are going to get, half are going to get mixed in with Shorty and half with Stu. Or maybe I go thirds, because it might be that I have another love that lasts 30 years this time. I've had 10, then 20, maybe it's going to be 30 this year. But my kids are going to be under instructions that I'm going to be shared between the men I love.
Oh, Kim, I love it. It's absolutely beautiful. What is something that you say to someone who's newly widowed?
I'm actually the last person that you ever want to say anything, because I can't help them. It's a trauma that's going to live with you forever. And you don't want it to define you, but it does. And you won't get over it. I once wrote a poem about the knock on the door and the feeling of my heart exploding and spewing out the rest of my life. And I really feel like that. I think somehow the pain in your heart gets less over time, only because once you keep ramming your head against a brick wall, at some point you go unconscious and you just sort of keep going. But there's moments where it will rip you apart, just like it did at the beginning. And I don't want to say this to new widows because they're looking for an answer that says, will this stop hurting? And it won't.
I think also the flip side of that, which is completely honest and right, is that it hurts because you loved so much.
Yes.
It's the only reason why, and there's some comfort in that also.
But it doesn't mean that life is no longer good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't mean my life is good. My life is exciting and I do great things. I just live with a pain that's inside of me and I'll live with that forever. But I'm not broken.
Yeah, that's a really perfect way to put it. Kim, lastly, is there a quote that resonates with you most at this point in your journey?
There's all these trite things on Instagram. It all comes up, all these things, the sun will come up tomorrow and all of those things. But I think, I just think my favourite movie, Love Actually, it is all about love, actually. And grief is just love with nowhere to go.
Oh, what a beautiful way to end. What a perfect rounding out of you, Kim. You are full of love and you have an entire, forget one book, you've got a trilogy in you. I can't thank you enough for joining us on the Widow Diaries and for being so open and brave. It's been a treat. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thanks, Carolyn. Lovely to talk to you.
Thank you to all my guests for sharing their stories so generously. The Widow Diaries is hosted and produced by me, Caroline Winter from Pod Talk for First Light Widowed Support, which provides information, resources and connection for young widowed people throughout Australia. Follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and you can also find out more information at firstlight.org.au. This podcast acknowledges and celebrates the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which stories have been told for thousands of years and on which this podcast is recorded.